Joining us now on the debate for the full hour, the Sophomores in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Bruce Heyer, New Democrat Member of Parliament from Thunder Bay, Superior North. In the nation's capital, Lisa MacLeod, Progressive Conservative MPP from Nepean Carleton. And joining us here in studio, Members of Parliament, Peter Braid, Conservative from Kitchener Centre, Bonnie Crombie, Liberal from Mississauga Streetsville, and from the Ontario Legislature, Yasser Naqvi, Liberal from Ottawa Centre, and Paul Miller, New Democrat from Hamilton East Stony Creek. Welcome back, Sophomores.
Good to be here.
No, not rookies any longer. All right, good for you. Well, I know you had a great time last time you were here a year ago, but just in case any of our viewers forgot about what a wonderful time that is, we prepared this little clip package to just sort of, you know, get in with the feeling. So, Michael, let's start there. Roll tape, please.
We were in the midst of a quote-unquote parliamentary crisis, and we were proroguing. And I really had wondered what the heck I'd got myself into.
So as I proudly deliver the very first question asked of any of us, of the very first throne speech, I got heckled, booed, and told to sit down because I used the Minister of Finance's first name in a quotation.
You said Jim?
I said, oh, I did Jim Flaherty in a quotation. It was a quotation from an economist talking about the economic statement.
Not allowed to do that.
Was about to come. No, not allowed to do that whatsoever. You're supposed to use their proper title or their riding. And as a newbie, I didn't know that.
So I had to get right into it.
Sink or swim, and you swim.
Sink or swim.
This is certainly the least boring job I've ever had.
This is a much faster paced time. The reason I think probably an MPP or an MP doesn't go and sit next to another member, because we're blackberrying the whole time when we are sitting. But that's true. I mean, if the camera ever panned from the speaker or the person who's speaking in the House, you'll see all of us doing our prayers. So times have changed as well. We are doing, I think, five things at the same time.
You know, it was hard. Elizabeth Whitmer is sitting there, Frank Cleese, Tim Hudak, John Tory was our leader. He was so well known, and Norm Sterling, Bob Runciman, very intimidating. And I had always been an activist in the party. These were my heroes during, 1995 to 2003.
I find Parliament very dysfunctional. Even though I'm a newbie on the Hill, I've been watching it for decades. I think it's getting worse, and I think we need to do something about it.
Do you enjoy the gamesmanship of question period? You sure seem to when I watch it.
Lively, if anything.
Yeah.
They just basically asked the minister, well, you did this, minister, and you spent this much money in our community, and you did a wonderful job. Well, that makes me ill, because as an opposition member, I would prefer that they answered the question I ask, but I never do get an answer. It's deferred, diverted. And that is extremely frustrating.
Hang on one second.
That's why it's called question period.
There's no answers.
My God, it's been a roller coaster. It's been 9 months. Look what we've lived through. 2 economic statements, 2 parliamentary impasses. We've had a coalition, a prorogation, a probation period, and I've had 2 leaders. It has been nothing slow for me.
Like, really give us the straight goods here. 1 to 10, 1 being, why the hell did I run for this job anyway? 10 being, I love every damn second of it. Where are you in your jobs? Bruce?
1 to 10.
Yeah. Oh, you're all there.
Different days, different response. The full gamut.
The full gamut. Okay, welcome back, everybody, for the full gamut. And you are all, obviously, a year more experienced and a year better, and I'm obviously a year worse, because I've got your riding wrong off the top of the program. You're Kitchener-Waterloo, which you won by how many votes in 2008?
17.
You still get teased about that?
Not as much anymore.
Do you think you should be teased about it?
It's still my favorite number, though.
17 is still your favorite number. What's the biggest change you've noticed in your life from going from rookie to sophomore?
I think, this job, Steve, it's about getting things done. It's about getting things done for our constituents and for our community. I think I'm better at getting things done for constituents.
Just because you know things more?
You know things more. You know how to navigate through the layers and complexities of government a bit better, and you've built relationships. You know who to go to.
That's how you get the job done.
That's how you get the job done.
Remind us of your background. You came here from Pakistan when you were a teenager, right?
I was 15 years old when I came, immigrated to Canada, to Ontario.
Fleeing.
Yeah, my parents were involved in pro-democracy movement in Pakistan. My father was imprisoned for 9 months. So those were the circumstances in which when my family came to Canada.
Now, one of the biggest changes in your life, I guess, over the past year is you're not just an MPP anymore. You're the president of the party now, too.
I also got elected as the president of the Ontario Liberal Party in my 2nd term now.
And what were you thinking of when you ran for that?
Well, I believe in my party and I believe in the democratic process, and that was another way of contributing. It's a volunteer job, though.
It's a volunteer job. No extra pay for that.
Not at all.
But you're on the hook for making sure they win the next election. Which if they lose, they're all going to blame you now.
I am part of the team, and that's our task, so we're working on it.
Gotcha. Okay, Bonnie Crombie. Last time, 2008, Liberals elected 4 new MPs. You were one of them? Is that right?
13, I think.
13 new MPs?
13.
So what am I thinking of? What's the 4? I don't know.
4 of us here, 13.
13 new, okay. And one of the changes that's taken place in the past year is that you're now the chair of the GTA caucus of the Liberal Party.
Yes.
Which is a big caucus.
Well, we're
That's practically half the party.
There are 32 GTA caucus members, 36 in Ontario, 38 in Ontario, 6 more. It's been a big year. I've changed, I went from audits to infrastructure to copyright. I've changed committees that I've been responsible for. And I think I hit a stride. Things are just a little easier, as Peter described. You've built networks. You know who to turn to. You know who to call. I think I've hit my stride. Speaking in the House of Commons, I'm a little easier to stand up and speak on issues, ask questions. I don't deliver the same kind of fireballs I did. A little more tempered, a little more deliberate.
How'd you get the caucus job, the caucus chair job?
Well, you put your name out that you want to run, and hopefully that scares off everyone else who wants the job.
So colleagues voted for you?
Yeah, I was acclaimed, actually.
Acclaimed?
You
okay.
want to scare people off.
Now, I know your politics is federal, but all politics is local.
That's
so
right.
what do you think about Hazel McCallion getting reelected?
Oh, I think it was terrific.
Okay, what do you think about Carolyn Parrish losing the election?
I'm a big fan of Hazel McCallion. I think it was terrific that Hazel
Something tells me you thought that was equally as terrific. Okay, Lisa, let's go to you in the nation's capital. Biggest change, I guess, in your political life from last year to this year is that instead of being perennially behind, your party is 11 or 12 points ahead of the McGuinty government last time I checked. Does that change the way you do your job every day?
Well, look, last time I was on your program in this capacity, we were going through a leadership race. So life has changed significantly for those of us in the Progressive Conservative Caucus. Certainly the last year, we've seen Tim Hudak take a leadership role in the province and is a little bit ahead of, well, we're significantly ahead of the polls, particularly in Eastern Ontario. But, you know, the hard work continues. And again, we're into an election year, so it brings a focus. But in the last year, I found, you know, just to pick up on Bonnie's point, you do hit your stride when you start to feel a little bit more comfortable in the legislature and in your office. You're a lot more well-known in your community the longer that you serve. And I think that when you are in the legislature, you're a lot more comfortable speaking. So it's been an interesting year in that regard.
Okay, tell me this though, Lisa. When you show up 10 points behind or you show up 12 points ahead, I mean, I presume you're showing up for work a little cockier these days, aren't you? Being 12 points up?
I can say there's a lot of momentum with Tim Hudak in the PC caucus right now. No one takes anything for granted. A lot of hard work has gotten us to the point we're at, and we have a year to go. So, you know, it's an exciting time. There's no question. You know, when I talked to you last time, I was very overcome with you know, humility of being in a caucus with a lot of veterans of our political party and in government. And now I get to work with them a little bit more collaboratively because I can look at them as equals now as a member of a caucus.
Gotcha.
And not as just a newbie.
Bruce, a real serious question for you.
Uh-oh.
One of the biggest developments in your life, I guess, from last year to this year is that you're still alive. You want to explain that?
Well, when I look at the tapes of your last program and I see my neck swelled up, I go, why didn't I realize that I have neck cancer? I was diagnosed. I was treated for several months. It wasn't fun. I showed up for work every day right through my treatments. Apparently, I'm all better. I feel great, look great, everybody tells me, and but I never stopped working. But yes, it did give me a cause for pause.
How do you show up and care about your job when you're fighting for your life at the same time?
Oh, it's better than staying home and feeling sorry for yourself. And there's a lot to be done. It's a very busy job. Basically, being an MP in Ottawa is like having 2 full jobs, one in Ottawa and one back in your riding.
That's right.
Okay. Paul, shall we do the dance?
Yes, we
should.
should.
We always do the dance. Who are you married to?
I'm married to your cousins, Carol.
And in the interest of full disclosure, we always put that out there. What have you noticed is the biggest difference between rookie and sophomore Paul Miller, MPP, Hamilton East, Stony Creek?
Well, to dovetail on what Lisa said, I think when you first get there, you're overwhelmed, you're a little nervous. Obviously, they throw you right into the fire in our party because there's only 10 members. So I had to do a 40-minute, second week I was there, I had to do a 40-minute response to the throne speech, which I was a little rattled, but I managed to get through it. And then he said, well, that's the easy part. Now you've got to do an hour rookie speech in the House. So you have to stand up for an hour and talk. So coming from a steelworker background, that was, quite a task for me to overcome, but I seem to have got through it.
The challenge was to take the F-bombs out.
Well, there had been 4-letter words in my past, yes, that had cropped up.
Just the odd one. Do you feel more comfortable on the job now?
Absolutely. I think as the rest of the people spoke on it, you get more confident. You use your notes less. You can ad lib a lot more, and certainly with a veteran like Mr. Cormos, mentoring me at times about how to handle myself and what to do, it doesn't hurt.
You think he's the best example to take direction from? Never mind, let's move on. Did the year go fast, Peter?
It went by in a blur, absolutely, through the mists of time.
How come?
Indeed. Because the job is a very busy one, and the experiences go by in a very fleeting way, and each day brings a new set of issues and experiences, and you quickly lose sight of what you've been through, and the pace is just so quick. It just keeps moving at a torrential speed.
I wonder if part of this is, and I want to get into some conversation about this, Bonnie, let me go to you first. We keep hearing the conventional wisdom is that the electorate is absolutely furious, angry, irate with everybody in politics these days, and the midterms in the United States we just saw, there was a complete, for I guess the third election in a row, throw the bums out. Do you see that?
Well, I do, but you don't want this to be partisan, I hear. So what do you want me to say? I hear an electorate that's angry, but I think they're angry at the economic waste and mismanagement that they've seen. You want me to launch into this?
Is that in the province of Ontario or nationally?
No, it's nationally. $16 billion in jet fighters, $11 billion in Chinook helicopters, and $1.3 billion in GA-G20 misspending, mismanagement, misabuse. So there's a democratic deficit in this nation as well. Anyone who opposes dissents, then they seem to get fired.
So how come they're always ahead of you guys in the polls?
Well, people are getting to know us better. We had a great summer. We had a great year. We continue to work through prorogation. Let's not forget. We had a great conference, talk about our platform, talk about Canada going forward, Canada 150. We had a very successful tour over the summer on the Liberal Express bus. I had 2 tours on that bus myself. And I think our numbers grew in the summer. I think you saw a very renewed, reinvigorated leader, Michael Ignatieff. More comfortable in his skin as well. I've seen people connect with him.
I'm going to get Peter's view on this. Do you see that anger in the land?
Well, let me first come back to your question about why we're ahead in the polls. We're ahead in the polls because it's about leadership, and we're ahead in the polls because Canadians recognize that this Conservative government and Prime Minister Harper has very, very effectively managed the economy through some very challenging times.
Guys, we're getting partisan here. And I so want to, Bonnie, I'm blaming you for this. I totally wanted us to stay away from all this stuff, away from talking points. But anyway.
Now to address your second question, I'm not seeing that, in my community, in Kitchener-Waterloo, the center of innovation, what I'm seeing is that constituents are concerned, understandably, about the economy. And they're concerned about, and they want to ensure that taxpayers' money is used effectively, absolutely. But there's certainly not anger in Kitchener-Waterloo. If anything, there is excitement. There's recognition that we're bringing the attention of the country and the world. We're a new engine of the national economy.
Let me see what it's like. I'm going to get Yasser and Lisa to talk about Eastern Ontario. Lisa, from your perch, how does it look there in terms of voter antipathy to all politicians in general?
I think that there is voter anger. There certainly is here. We had a particularly difficult summer in the province of Ontario with taxation, and now with hydro increases. That would be the #1 issue that I'm hearing at my office, and it's the #1 issue I've been hearing when I'm out in the community, and I pride myself on going to 8 to 10 events per Saturday and Sunday. So we're hearing that, and I think it's being reflected in the public opinion polls. I think it was reflected in many of the municipalities across Ontario in the last municipal election. And we saw it to some extent in the South, given the economic circumstances in our nation as well as in the United States. So yes, I'm hearing it. I started hearing it, I think, I would say June, July of this summer, and it's just continued. And I think people are very concerned right now with their own family's well-being, financial well-being, and their neighbors. And it's been loud and clear for quite some time now.
Okay, let me get Yasser on that. What do you see?
Well, there's definitely anxiety out there across the land, and for the right reason. I mean, I think we need to remember the context we're living in. We have just lived through one of the most devastating global recessions right here in Canada and globally across. We are obviously very close to the United States of America, and there's a lot that is going in the US economy, which has an impact psychologically in Canada. Every time we tune in TV, we see what's happening in France and in Greece and in Portugal. That has an impact. So, you know, of course, Canada being a very strong part of the global economy is not immune to the kind of events that are unfolding, and that anxiety is definitely reflected. Now, we have weathered the recession far better than other G8 countries. Our banks did not need to bail out. Our industries are doing quite well.
Is that why Harper's ahead?
Well, I think people are just looking at. I don't look into polls that much, good or bad. I think in the end of the day, what it really comes down to is serving your constituents, but I think we all are individually being mandated to do so, and working on their needs, wants, and desires, and that's in the end of the day makes a big difference.
Okay, let me go up north. What's the view up north, Bruce?
Voters are anxious, they are angry, they are concerned, I think for good reasons, and of course we politicians catch the heat. But I think what they really need to understand, and I certainly believe I understand, that our problem is really the system. We don't have a governmental system in Canada that brings out the best in our politicians. We have a system that all too often brings out the worst in us inside and outside of the House. And so, as I talked about last time, another year and a half on the Hill has only reinforced my belief that unless or until we get proportional representation, we're going to have a very, very flawed government.
Well, you know, it is a minority parliament right now. Have you got together with the other parties and said, unless you give us this, Mr. Harper, we're going to pull a plug?
I can only be concerned about my own vote and have some influence over my own party. But we have a system now where with 37% of the vote, and it's really less than that because a lot of voters have given up voting, you can get 100% of the power. So one of the reasons I think we're so rude and there's such a lack of decorum in the House is you've got one group of people that has virtually 100% of the power and becomes arrogant, and you have the rest of us who feel frustrated and feel that there's very little that we can do except to heckle and to criticize. And I've been visiting a lot of other countries to look at countries that have coalition governments, minority governments, based on proportional representation, and they're much more cooperative, and they're also more prosperous and more advanced in many ways.
Okay, this is an odd question to be asking a guy who's a former steelworker, especially who represents the part of Ontario where Stelco used to be. Now they call it U.S. Steel Canada. They got locked out. Members got locked out. But do you see any contentment out there at all? Everybody talks about anger. Everybody's so angry and anxious. Do you not see any contentment in the electorate?
I can only speak for my region. No, there's no contentment. People are angry. They're upset. Hamilton's been hit very hard with job losses. And also we don't see any manufacturing coming into the city to alleviate some of the pressure on our tax base. When I first started at Stelco, 70% of our tax base was industrial and manufacturing and 30% was residential. It's now opposite. So obviously we pay some of the highest taxes in Ontario, right in Hamilton, and the income from the jobs doesn't match the tax base. So we've got a real problem there, and I think federally and provincially, both governments that are in power have eroded our base industries. They've sold off to multinationals. We have no control over our economy anymore. When we say we have to compete in a global market, yes, we have to compete, but it would certainly be better if they were Canadian-owned companies competing.
Well, they just put the kibosh on the potash sale.
Well, you know,
they got to get kudos for that. I presume.
Well, they haven't done it yet. They have to vote on it yet.
30-day period.
They have to vote on it, and that's just one. There are so many others. 90% of our forestry, 95% of our mining, 100% of our steel production in this country is foreign-owned. Okay. If you don't control your economy, if you can't control your base industries, you don't control your economy.
Let's get into some discussion about whether or not it's going to be possible to see much progress on anything over the next year. And the reason I bring that up is because I guess you folks in Ontario are going to be, you know, we're in election season right now, right? The Conservatives are already running ads. Lisa, your party's running ads. We're still, what, 47 weeks away from the next Ontario election. Federally, obviously, an election could come at any time, depending on, because it's a minority parliament, when the opposition decides they want to pull the plug or when you guys want to manufacture your own defeat. My question is, Peter, to you first, what have you learned about how much progress is possible on an issue, given that we're now into an election timetable, what some people would call silly season?
The level of progress can be frustrating, there's no question about it. I think we saw significant levels of cooperation both in the House of Commons and in the province of Ontario In my case, I can speak to cooperation between Conservative members of Parliament and Liberal MPPs or the governments of Dalton McGuinty through the economic, the serious economic downturn. It's because I think we all recognize that the circumstances were serious and we needed to come together. It's unfortunate perhaps that it takes a situation as serious as that. In terms of the election timing, our government will continue to focus on the economy. That's the #1 priority and concern of Canadians. That's our job #1.
Do you think you can make any progress these days with everybody worrying about, everybody looks at everything through the prism of an upcoming election now?
No, this government is very divisive. They pit people, young against old, rich against poor, east against west. There's so much unrest. We didn't even get to the unemployment numbers. People are, there's over a million people unemployed. They're staying unemployed longer, 27 weeks. We've been at a rut of 8% unemployment or more. There's just so much divisiveness. I don't see the level of cooperation that we need, and I don't think this government attempts to seek that out. There's one Conservative member of Parliament, Michael Chong, who has put some reform measures in place to discuss how we could reform question period. And I think there's some momentum from all the parties to rally around to attempt to reform question period to make it more productive.
Bruce, I know that's a priority of yours. How's that coming along?
Well, I've introduced a private member's motion to change the rules in the House, and that would allow people from different parties to co-sponsor private members' legislation. And the way it works now is if you have a good idea as a private member, validly or not, it gets tagged as an NDP motion or a Liberal motion, and then everybody's back in these polarized tribal silos again. So if we could get some cooperation in actually introducing the bills jointly, it's my hope that then they'd be looked at more on their merits and less on their roots.
Lisa, do you find that as well, that with an election a year away and you guys are taking out ads already, it's impossible to make progress on issues because everybody's just worried about the next election?
I think there's two challenges. One is if you're the government, and I won't be partisan. I think one is if you're the government, you have to respond to what the public wants and at the same time stick true to your values and not appear to be selling out in the middle of an election or on the lead up to. The other challenge, I think, for opposition parties, particularly those that are on the cusp of forming a government, is to put forward a reasonable costed, saleable platform in the lead up to an election, one that can be achieved. And I think right now my party under Tim Hudak is consulting Ontarians and we're working very hard so that we can put forward a platform in the lead up to the next election that reflects Ontario today and Ontario for the next 10 to 20 years. So those are some of the challenges. No question with fixed election dates, however, that you're going to see year-long election campaigns. I was nominated on October the 6th. Tim Hudak was at my nomination. It was a kickoff. We were calling it the pre-anniversary, the pre-anniversary or the one-year countdown to the election. And the other thing that we have to do now in Canadian politics more than ever before is, identify who you are before your opponents identify who you are and shape the public opinion of you. So one of the big things that we've been focusing on is ensuring that our leader is more well known. That's why those ads are out there. They're very positive. They show him with his family. And then for us, no question, I think people are really excited about an Ontario election is what I'm finding out as well. And they're wondering where our, parties are going to stand on the HST and these hydro costs. So it's going to be an interesting year, but no question with a fixed election date, there's that one-year countdown, and it occurred last time as well.
The fixed election date, I think the idea was that there wouldn't be any surprise about when the election was going to happen, and therefore, we wouldn't be into perpetual campaigns, but it kind of hasn't worked out that way, has it?
Well, it speaks to transparency, right? I mean, if there was no fixed election date today, you and I and Lisa and Paul, we were talking about, so what's Dalton McGuinty thinking? What do you think he's going to call an election? And that would have been the biggest topic of conversation. Now there's a level playing field between all political parties because we all know exactly when is the election date. So we can, I agree with Lisa what she's saying, that we can all prepare, we can start putting up sensible ideas out there which are fully costed out so that people have the opportunity to make their decision. In the end of the day, that's what matters. Now, I think one of the things we can't forget, we're all politicians. And politics is always part of the calculus. So even it's election year or non-election year, you're always keeping that calculus in mind when you're making decisions, when you're debating issues in the House. So I don't see much different tactic going on. The only difference is that there's a date that's coming up, which is important.
When you make that calculus, Paul, I wonder how you do it. Do you do it first and foremost as what does this mean for me in my riding, or what does it mean for my party? Or how do you work it out?
I think it's a combination of both, Steve. I think you're trying to address the issues that are important to the people you represent in your riding. You're also trying to move the party agenda ahead as best you can. We don't necessarily always agree with issues. We certainly discuss it in caucus, and we have our different views, and finally come to a consensus. And sometimes, you'll see in the House, sometimes Liberal members or other members won't be there because they don't agree with their party or they don't want to vote on a particular issue, so they abstain. They're not there. It happens. My biggest frustration, I think, is question period. That's all it is. It's question period. No answers. No answers, and it continues. And then I remember when I first got there, Mr. McGuinty stood up in the House and welcomed all the new members to the House. And he said, "We're here to work together." Remember, this is the key word, together, for the people of Ontario. Not true. Partisan politics takes over. Even if you come up with a good idea as an opposition member, it gets to committee level. There's 5 Liberal members, 2 Conservatives, 1 NDP, and 99% of the time it gets shot down. And that's very frustrating because we come from, we talk to a lot of people from different issues on different areas of society, and they come up and they talk to our party. This is what they want, whether it's the Nurses Association, the teachers, whoever wants a particular issue, and we bring it forward at committee, and it dies because it's an NDP private member's bill or a Conservative private member's bill.
Let me follow up with Bonnie on that, because they've got the committee makeup they have because it's a majority government in Ontario. You have different makeup in Ottawa because it's minority parliament. So do you find that opposition members can have more of an impact in shaping a bill because, do you outnumber the government on some committees, or at least it's 50-50 anyway?
Yeah, no, if we have the chair, then we outnumber them,
right.
Yes.
So can you have more of an impact as an ordinary member trying to do committee work?
I think that the bulk of the most constructive work is done in the committees, certainly when we're presenting amendments or reviewing bills or going clause by clause. I mean, I was involved with one particular bill. It was, I don't know if I should say what it was. It was, and the government.
Too late, you have to. Too late. Which one?
Holocaust Monument Bill, and the government tabled amendments at 12 hours the night before. Didn't give us a chance to review them, and they altered the substance of the bill. So fortunately, we, in committee had the opportunity to say, well, let's hold back here. What was the original intent of the bill? What did we all get? We provided unanimous support in the House, and this does not reflect what these amendments that you've presented. So.
Bruce, let me go to you on that. The idea that everybody comes to Parliament or everybody comes to Queen's Park with the idea of working together to do the public's business, admittedly from different ideologies or standpoints, but ideally to do the public's business. Do you see that ever happening?
Not often enough. I come from the small business sector. I had 3 small businesses, and even with my competitors, it was kind of a healthy competition where we competed on in positive ways, on quality, trying to do things better and lure the customer, or in this case, the voter. I see most of what's going on the Hill now as government by ambush. How can we surprise them today? How can they surprise us today? How can we be ready for that ambush? It's very simplistic. What I've been trying to do, and I successfully did it on my private member's bill on climate change, at least I got it through the House, not the Senate. It's stuck in the Senate. But I invested a lot of time and energy in beer, coffee, dinner, lunch, conversations one-on-one to explain the merits of the bill and to help to build support for it. And in the end, that was effective. And as you know, that doesn't happen often with a private member's bill. But the downside of that success story is right now in an unelected, unaccountable Senate, now controlled by Stephen Harper. He said he would never appoint senators to an unelected Senate, but he has. And now the Conservatives won't even allow the climate change bill, Canada's only climate change bill, to come before the Senate even for debate.
Okay, let me get Peter on that. Is there, just generically speaking here, is there just far too much political gamesmanship still going on at the expense of, on those big issues where there could be a coming together of all sides ever happening?
A couple of clarifications first. And it's interesting that I think we're observing this. And this is maybe one of the unfortunate things that happens with time. I'm noticing all of my colleagues are being a bit more partisan with this show than we were 18 months ago. So I'm not sure what that says.
Well, yes, you are. We're into election season. That's what it says.
Perhaps. Secondly, we talked earlier about the importance of cooperation, the importance of civility and decorum in the House. And I think whether we're referring to either Queen's Park or the House of Commons, it's disingenuous to claim that any one party or any one group has responsibility. We all share some blame. We all share the responsibility of fixing it. Michael Chong has indeed tabled a very substantive private members bill to improve not only question period, but civility and decorum in the House. And I look forward to Bonnie's support of that private members bill and all of your colleagues in the Liberal caucus.
Shall I try to get her to sign on the dotted line right now? Do you want to?
Well, I do have some issues with the bill. I mean, if you're only going to be permitted to ask the Prime Minister questions once a week on a Wednesday, what if he's out of town? Do we get the privilege of listening to John Baird yet again, right? Or if they allow 4 minutes for questioning, is that just going to be another 4-minute rant of non-answers, which is, as my colleague here, Paul, said, there's just non-answers in the House, no matter what level of government you're at. We ask substantive questions. I think we've really changed the way we operate as a party. We've eliminated heckling on our side. We stand for civility and decorum. We ask we do a lot of research. We
don't heckle anymore?
No, I try not to. It's tough sometimes.
It's interesting
we try not
that they check their behavior after Mr. Chong tabled his private members bill.
No, that's not true. We have a new House leader, and his rules are there's just no heckling. No heckling, strong, direct, and constructive questions with non-answers, always.
Lisa MacLeod and Paul Miller could never live in such a universe. Am I right about that? Lisa, you could not go through one question period without heckling.
Or Paul.
Heckling's fine as long as it's witty, right?
Well, look, I think that my colleagues take a far more pessimistic view of that chamber than I do. I enjoy the debates, the discussions that happen in the chamber. I worked on Parliament Hill before many of our colleagues were elected federally. And I can assure you, regardless of which political party is in office and which level of government you're dealing with, there is always going to be that discussion. It's the British parliamentary democracy. And many people know, and I think the viewing public understands, that that's 1 hour of the day. Having said that, we have many more hours of the day where we're in the chamber or we're in committee where we do work, and it is thoughtful and it is progress. And I would hate to see some partisanship get in the way today of what is happening coast to coast in every British democracy, British parliamentary democracy in the world.
You know what? I want to follow up on that, Lisa, because people ask me, most of what everybody sees on television is question period, which doesn't necessarily put politicians in the best light. But it's the theater and the game, and we get that. So what do you spend most of your time working on? Yasser?
Well, there's a lot of work going on. I think in the last show we talked about, well, first of all, as Lisa alluded, we are in the chamber, right? Our legislature at Queen's Park sits from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock late afternoon. And with certain sort of lunch breaks, we are in the House debating bills. So, and there's some good debates that take place. There are some really good ideas, and there's a certain format goes on. You speak for 20 minutes essentially, and other parties have 2 minutes to respond, and then you have 2 minutes to do a rebuttal. It's sort of a good sort of peer review, which you get subjected to right away, and you get questioned or challenged on point of views you have raised. So that is a good place to debate. It's far more civilized. Interesting ideas come through.
Do you know why it's more civilized? I'll tell you why it's more civilized. Because the media ignores it.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, that question period is a theater, and everybody's trying to make a point. And as Lisa said, it is part of our British Westminster model.
What do you spend?
Question period is also very emotional. I mean, you're bringing forward ideas, concerns, and problems from your constituency or from your critic area, and there's various points of view, and you have 107 people in a room, and I mean, don't discount that, the level of passion people bring to the job. And I think that when you look at the debates that occur before and after question period and in the chamber, you're looking at things more in depth than this 1.5 minute question and 1.5 minute answer, where people don't get what they want either in terms of the question or the answer. And I think that's why people get really focused on question period. But there's a lot more that's done there, as Yasser's mentioned. And we have to think through these issues of the day. Our legislation drives both chambers, and you have to be very thoughtful and have to put forward your ideas, your constituents' ideas, and those who are affected, as we call them, stakeholders, who are affected by legislation.
Let me get Paul and Bonnie.
It must be an election year. Lisa's really talking a lot.
She's doing okay.
I know.
I talk all the time.
She does. She's doing fine. She's doing fine.
Anyways, you were asking?
I wanted to know actually.
What do you do all day?
What I do all day?
Yeah.
Well,
outside the house.
Outside the house, well, you certainly are dealing with your constituency problems. I commute a lot back and forth from Hamilton, depending on the issue. Like last night we had the steelworkers at the gates of Selco, U.S. Steel, and this certainly was an emotionally charged event with speakers. And these things happen on a regular basis, depending on the issue, and you have to be available to the media as well as your constituents, and certainly don't rule out your family requires you at times too. So this is not a 40-hour a week job.
No,
this is a lot more.
Bonnie?
There's so much we do. First of all, you have duty time, right? So I'm at
That's
least 3 days in the house, exactly. Then I have committee time. I have Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 hours of committee. That's 8 hours of committee. That means Monday nights and Wednesday nights I'm preparing for my committee. Tuesday nights we have internal committees to discuss legislation, discuss private members' bills. The rest of the time you're writing speeches, doing research, preparing questions. I have a critic responsibility I have to follow up on. And then there's the constituency work on top of that.
And that's in Ottawa only.
That's in Ottawa only.
And you come home on the weekends and you got...
Then you go, as Lisa said, 12 events every weekend. As soon as you get off the plane, you go to 2.
I think it's interesting. When we're all doing the work at the legislature, be it in Ottawa or in Toronto, in the middle, we're all calling home, calling our constituents. I have my staff gives me 15 to 20 names a day to call of constituents who wants to talk to me. And this is before even I go back to Ottawa. To meet them face to face or other constituents. So there's no break time. You're always on the go and you're always trying to work on different issues and finding solutions to those issues.
Let me get Peter on that. What is the one thing constituents come to you with and say, solve this problem for me?
Well, I think individual constituents, the vast majority of our cases are immigration related.
So help get my family in from overseas or something like that?
Or a student visa. I have 2 universities, the University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier University in my riding. They may be student visa related. Essentially any interaction that a constituent, a citizen could have with the federal government or a federal government department. If that constituent needs your help, your support, they need an obstacle cleared, that's why we're there.
That's what you do. Let me get Bruce on that, because I bet the experience is different in the north than it would be from the south. What's the one issue people come to you most often for, Bruce, and say, help solve this for me?
Well, first, just a little context. My riding is over 150,000 square kilometers. It's got 30 communities, 11 of which are First Nations communities, only 86,000 constituents, a little less than some ridings, but it's really big on a low budget. So just covering the terra firma is a lot of work. And in our riding, the forest industry and other resource industries have really been neglected by this government. We have massive unemployment across the north. My constituents, some of them are angry that I haven't yet reopened all the paper mills and sawmills in northern Ontario. And many others understand that the system is flawed, but that doesn't help when they can't pay the mortgage, can't pay the heat, can't pay the bills. So because I'm a New Democrat and because I'm who I am, I try to put in extra effort on the little guys, the average Canadians who are feeling neglected and marginalized by our government.
Lisa, how about you? What's the, I'm presuming as a provincial politician, you'll get fewer immigration claims, but you'll have something else be top of the list. What would it be?
Well, I think just similar to our colleagues up north. Right now, a year ago, I probably would have said people looking for a long-term care space for their loved one or a family physician. In the last couple of months, I've noticed the big issues are hydro, paying the bills and making sure they're still connected in time for the winter. It's been a real eye-opener, the skyrocketing of the increase there. And so the big issue that we're hearing in our constituency is that. But healthcare predominantly, if I were to talk about in the long view, I think that is the one exceptional issue that we deal with, and you know, the birth certificates are the big issues. But like Yasser, I mean, Friday is constituency day and you're still dealing with the issues while you're at Queen's Park. And I take pride of one of the things I like to do is when there's an issue in my community is just to be able to take it directly to the minister, take the political heat down and just say, can we work together, keep it out of the papers, and solve a problem for my constituents, whether that's building a health center or trying to get a pet deer back. There's all kinds of little issues, or getting a bridge in the community. It's been working directly with the minister, just crossing the floor, they'll cross over to talk to me, and I think it's an effective way to do it.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes to go here, and I want to do two different sides of the I guess, emotional coin that you folks have to deal with in your lives. And one is, what the hell was I thinking when I ran for office? And the other is, that's what I was thinking when I ran for office. So, okay, Paul, why don't we start with you? I want you to tell me about that moment when something so frustrated, angered, annoyed, whatever you, and you said to yourself, what the hell am I doing here?
Well, there's good times and bad times, obviously, but I think a good event was
Paul, that's not what I asked. I wanted the, what the hell am I doing here?
What the hell am I doing there? I asked for it, and I'm there to do a job for the people I represent, and it's no sense crying about it. You've taken the job, you've taken it on, complete your assignment, do what you best you can for the people you represent, and hopefully they'll return you if you've done a good job.
Peter, was there a day when the political BS was so crazy you just said to yourself, what am I doing here?
It happens from time to time in Ottawa, and I think when those situations occur, there's situations where I'm faced with what I think are glaring contradictions, where I feel that perhaps politics is being played with,
Give me an example.
with a substantive issue, H1N1.
What's the example there?
H1N1.
Right,
Well,
what about it?
Well, I think I think politics was played with a serious issue. There were, the federal government was on top of the issue, working very closely with provinces, with municipalities to ensure that vaccines were being delivered and delivered effectively. And the opposition tried to make politics out of it. And it simply wasn't the case.
Okay. Bonnie?
Well, of course, I sit next to a pandemic expert, Dr. Kirsty Duncan, so I know that that's really not the case. But my moment was when the government, they introduced private members' bills, which masquerade, government bills masquerade as private members' bills, like 391, which was the gun registry. It was the gun, that for me, it was the gun registry. Why are we bringing this all up again? We know the police want this registry. There's a call out there from victims. Why are we reliving this nightmare? And for us, it was a nightmare, and thank goodness we prevailed.
Bruce?
Oh, can I have two quick ones?
Sure.
The first is when the HST was rammed through without debate, basically in 48 hours, all the rules of the House suspended with the permission of the Liberals as well as the Conservatives. The other one, though, has got to be back to Bill C-311. After over a year of work to get it through the House, that painful moment is today, that the only climate change bill before Parliament, a bill that's desperately needed for the planet and for growing green industries in Canada and getting on with it, is stuck in an unelected, unaccountable Senate. It makes me weep, metaphorically and sometimes literally.
Yes, sir. That moment.
You know I love my job. I absolutely love my job, so I don't think I've really had those moments, and I'm thinking really hard right now. I think the moments where you feel like, we're being overly partisan is when the issue is a reasonable issue and everybody knows that it's important, but because we have to differentiate ourselves, we will come up with a different, be it the debate on economy, right? I mean, we went through a very extensive tax reform package in the province of Ontario. HST was part of it, and we know the positions parties have taken, the interesting dynamics of federal Conservative government for it, provincial Liberal government for it, and then all the opposing positions that have been taken. When you know that this is the right thing to do, this is going to make the province stronger, but we had to go through the motion. And I say all this in a non-partisan fashion, that if my party was on the other side, we probably would have done the same thing, right? So that's, I think, frustrates you.
Lisa, how about you? That moment where you asked yourself, what the hell am I doing here?
I think you have sometimes in this job, given the amount of personalities and the partisanship and sometimes the travel, you're away from home, moments throughout the day where you think, why did I sign up? And then you remember why exactly. A couple of weeks ago, the same thing happened to me. I was wondering what the heck, the Liberals have forced closure on a bill that was important to me. I wanted to continue to debate it, and it effectively shut down the debate. But then I was able to put forward my own private member's bill that really buoyed my spirits. And of course, whenever you're in your constituency, I think all my colleagues on this panel would agree that you remember exactly why you're doing it. You're doing it for them. You love these people. You want to take their views. They're the most important people in your life outside of your family. You want to take those views to the Ontario legislature or in my other colleagues' case, to the House of Commons, and you want to advance their causes. You love your community. That's why you're there. And it's always easy to remember when you see that those smiling faces back home while you do your job.
Okay, Peter, let's do the other side of the coin now. That one good thing that happened, you said, aha, that's why I'm here.
The moment of pride. Well, there have been many, many of those, and the rewards far outweigh the challenges. There's no question about it. Again, this job is about making a difference. It's about making a difference either for an individual constituent or for community. So it's those moments where you've made a difference. Helping with the evacuation of a church group after the earthquake in Haiti is one example. Or a project, supporting a project that you see realized in your community, whether it's affordable housing or the Next Einstein initiative at the Perimeter Institute, for example, which will help find the next Einstein on the continent of Africa. These are, and I was involved in helping to facilitate and obtain federal government support for that transformative initiative. Those are the extreme rewards.
Bonnie, the moment when you said, that's why I'm here.
Well, there certainly was a few, as Peter mentioned, but the one in particular, and as Lisa has said, we do this for the people, for our constituents who support us, and we want to be there for them. And as Peter mentioned earlier, largely we do immigration work, and I have at any one time 200 cases open that we're reviewing. Many of them are spousal sponsorships, and some of them are just support letters for temporary resident visas. But once in a while, there's an unjust deportation. And we had one such case, and boy, we fought. And I walked over to across the hall to sit with the Minister of Immigration, sat with him and discussed this case. And I said, I would respect you if more. I would appreciate it if you would reopen this case and review it. I had a woman who I know if she went home, there would be an honor killing. Her son was an RCMP officer. The other son did a turn in our military, and here she was, a refugee, being turned back to her home country, facing an honor killing. And the minister reviewed the case, and while she was in the airport lineup ready to board that plane, her son, the RCMP officer, which was walking her on the plane, got the call to said she could stay. That was my proudest moment.
That's a good day. Bruce, your turn.
Well, the Conservatives tried to kill the Canadian Grain Commission and all the grain inspection jobs across Canada and privatize them. And we have small and medium-sized farmers and businesses across Canada. I thought this was a bad idea. I had researched it carefully. And here in Thunder Bay, we had 80 families that were dependent on grain inspection jobs. One day, the whip asked me if I, with the help of Alex Adamanenko, the agriculture critic for the NDP, could talk on grain for 2 hours and 36 minutes and do a hoist motion, which is the Canadian version of a filibuster, and kill, and I'm back to this ambush system in our parliament again, and kill the Conservative bill. And it was successful. I knew my topic. I was able to speak on it for a long time, several hours, and it worked. And we saved those jobs in Thunder Bay. We saved the Grain Commission. Not all would agree, but I think it was a good day for democracy, and it sure made me feel like I'd paid for my salary for about the next 50 years.
Okay, yes, sir.
Two instances I will highlight. I was able to get $3 million for a women's shelter in my riding, something which we've been working for a while. A dynamic group of women who run a small shelter and was in dire need of a new capital. Just working hard, making sure you again, as everybody's mentioning, you're working with different stakeholders. You're working with the minister's office, and presenting the best case possible. Times are tough. There's a deficit in the province. There's not a lot of money, and we were able to find money because it was the right thing to do, and it's been very exciting. Secondly, I've been lucky enough to table 3 private members' bills so far, and one of them became law. It got adopted by the government, so I'm very. It essentially creates a independent public health unit for the city of Ottawa. Our city council used to be the public health agency, and I always felt that politics and public health should not mix, so we are able to amend the City of Ottawa Act and create an independent board of public health for the City of Ottawa. So I thought that was a very neat day to have a law to your name.
Yes.
Paul.
I guess my most important small victory was to protect grandmothers in this province that were bringing up their grandkids. It took me over a year to convince the Liberal government, who had cut them off from funding, and to reinstate them. And it was grandmothers from Hamilton all over the province. The grandmothers organized. I had to put 150 grandmothers in front of Queen's Park with dolls representing their children, their grandkids.
You organized them to come to the legislature?
We organized them to come to the legislature in a protest, and we actually pretty well had to embarrass the Liberal government into at least reinstating them. They still haven't changed The legislation, I've got a private member's bill to change that, which is, at this point, has fallen on deaf ears also.
So what is the change that you actually got implemented that helps grandparents who have to raise their own grandchildren?
Well, the change was that they had cut them off for various reasons, because they had custody or they were taking care of their medical situation, and they found all kinds of reasons to cut them off.
Cut them off financially, you mean?
Cut them off financially, and it was fiscally and morally irresponsible of the government of the day to do that, because if you put a child into foster care, it's between $900 and $1,500 per child in foster care. Here was a grandmother, 70 years old, bringing up her 3 grandchildren because the mother was absent and the father was out of town. She was getting, I believe, less than $700 bringing up those 3 kids. And if it was foster care, you'd be looking at costing the taxpayers $4,000 to $5,000, including dental and medical. So here were grandparents doing yeoman service for the province, and that government decided to cut them off.
Just tell me in our last 30 seconds here, why did you decide to champion grandparents' issues?
When I was lobbying and going around to get elected, I stood on a porch with a grandmother on McNulty Avenue in Hamilton, and she said, I've had 100 promises from politicians. They never do anything. They never answer my calls. If you get elected, will you help us? I said, I will help you. And I did.
Good story indeed. Okay. Guys, that was pretty good. The sophomores. What do you call somebody who's been in for 3 years? There's rookies, there's sophomores, then there's, I'm just wondering if we're going to do this.
Seniors.
Seniors. Oh, it's juniors. Oh, it's actually, it's
Juniors.
full pros.
Or re-elected, question mark.
Or re-elected. That's right. If we were to reconvene this next year and do it one more time, I wonder how many of you would be coming back. I guess we'll find that out. I guess we'll find that out.
Class reunion.
Class reunion indeed. Can I thank, on the line from Thunder Bay, Bruce Heyer, the MP for the New Democrats up in Thunder Bay, Superior North, Lisa MacLeod, the MPP from Ottawa. Where are you from again? Nepean Carleton. That's your riding. Gosh, they changed the names a few years ago. I can't remember any of the ridings names anymore. Here in our studio, Yasser Naqvi, the Liberal for Ottawa Centre, and Peter Braid, the Conservative from Kitchener-Waterloo, whose 17 is his favorite number, we remember that. And on the other side of the table, Paul Miller, Hamilton East Stony Creek, New Democrat at Queen's Park, Bonnie Crombie, Mississauga Streetsville, Liberal, House of Commons. Thanks, everybody, very much for this.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Great to be here.